defining what does professionalism mean in the context of faculty. When we were talking about that in humanities, one of the things that really came up as something that there's really not a lot of emphasis on in higher education is leadership development opportunities for faculty members. And I think in a lot of organizations, they think about developing supervisors as leaders. But leadership and management are not the same thing. You do not have to be someone's boss to be a leader. And I feel very strongly that faculty members need to be fully committed to doing the work that it takes to truly position themselves as leaders to their students. I hope that you do as well. And that's why that you are here. Why is that? Why is that important? Why does it matter for faculty to position themselves as leaders to students? Any thoughts on that?
So students can have something to strive for in that class.
Okay.
When you think of leaders, you think about examples, leading by
Mhm.
example. And so if you are demonstrating those acts of leadership, the student will sometimes perform better in your
Right.
classroom, and sometimes be transparent and share information, and you have a better classroom experience when they see you as that person that they can that is lead and have classroom management.
Right, absolutely. I agree with that 100%.
I really, I think transparency is key. So yes, to keeping everything together and being that example for the students.
Absolutely. And there's not one right way to lead. There are a lot of right ways to lead. I did a quick search before the session today because it's been about a year or two before I facilitated this program and I hadn't looked up the statistics in a while. So Amazon, what does Amazon have to do with leadership? Amazon, they started out selling books. They still sell books. Right now, there are over 80,000 books on leadership for sale on Amazon. And probably all the ones that have been written are not available there. They all focus on leadership, but they don't all say the same, they don't all say the same thing. The approach that I want to talk to you about today is called the work of leaders, and it's based on research that was done by Wiley Learning Solutions, which is a part of Wiley Publishing. I'm a certified facilitator for some of their programs. And the most recent leadership development program that Wiley has released, as far as I know, it's the most recent, was based on this extensive research project that included a literature review of pretty much all of the leadership books that had been published at the time that this tool was developed, and also qualitative research, interviews with people in higher ed, with researchers, with leaders at organizations. And they gathered all this data and mined it and found that among all these books, and it wasn't 80,000 then, I think it was like 67 something thousand at that point, that leadership, there's really three common elements. Anytime that you talk about the work of leaders, there's three common elements, and that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the best practices for vision alignment and execution. Those are the three common elements of leadership. But like I said, there's not just one right way to lead. So, think about what you want your leadership hack to look like. Look around, look at faculty. We all present ourselves differently. We communicate differently. Students have an opportunity to connect with us as individuals. And that is a huge aspect of the one-to-many leadership that takes place within the organization. When we talk about what professionalism is, there's not really a focus on just looking at everybody should be the same. We should all start class this way. We should all end class this way. We should all have a blue notebook. We should all do this. We should all do that. But that we really need to meet people where they are. And there's another really essential concept of leadership, and that is the concept of servant leadership. Are you familiar with that? Have you heard of servant leadership before? Servant leadership, and if this really interests you, two books I would encourage you to read are the original servant leadership book. It is by Robert Greenleaf.
Yeah.
And it was published, I think, in the 70s, maybe the 80s. There are a lot of books about servant leadership, but the best place to start is to go to the source. And the other one I would recommend is The Work of Leaders, which Wiley published, which we're going to talk through kind of the outcome of that research. I used to have a copy of it that I would loan out, and I didn't get it back, so I don't have it to loan out anymore. I need to get another copy, but I highly recommend that as well. So different leadership hats, different leadership styles. But let's start out by looking at what leadership really is. If there's 80,000 books, there's a whole lot of different definitions. And we all know that as far as what our students see in us that causes them to see us as leaders or not, there's some commonality to what they're looking for, but they're also looking for a connection. Leadership at its most basic level, in my opinion, this is the best definition of leadership I have ever heard, is that leadership is about inspiring people to be better than they would have been without you. You know, in a business setting, managers are like, oh, these people would just leave me alone. Well, I mean, that's kind of your job, right?
Yeah.
If the workplace is full of people who whine and moan all the time, what's going on in the culture that is creating a workplace where people feel that that is the best way to communicate? If there are issues and challenges in your classroom, and this does relate directly to classroom management. I mean, there's only so much that we can control. Right, I mean, not everybody is going to be an A student in every subject. By no means am I trying to say that every student behavioral issue or every student academic issue is a faculty issue. But some of them likely could be turned around if the reality in the classroom is that the student really connects with that faculty member in a way where they truly believe that that faculty member is a source of inspiration to them. And I had one student a few years ago who had some challenges. And this student had turned in an assignment that was like probably not written at a middle school level. And so I left very respectful feedback on it, explaining why it was not what it needed to be and what we were looking for, an example of what we were looking for. And that student came to me later and said, no one has ever tried to help me improve. And the next work that student turned in was at an appropriate level for a college student. You know, that student just needed somebody to point them down a path. And it almost made me cry that the student said that no, basically this, they didn't use his words, but it was no one ever believed I had the ability to do this, so they didn't bother to tell me. I mean, that's how I interpreted what the student said. And that is, to me, just very heartbreaking, because we are here to help them achieve a future that some of them may have not thought would ever be possible. And if what they get from us is something that is limiting, like I had another student who asked me if they could turn in something late, and I said yes, like it was going to be one day late, and I said yes, and he said, don't you want to know why? And I said, no, not really. As long as you turn it in tomorrow, it's all good. And that same student said, well, I was late in something in another class a week or so ago, and my teacher, my professor, interrogated me. And when I told him it was a work conflict, told me I was going to have to make a choice and decide what was important to me, more important to me, school or my job. And this was a really good student. He was there every day. And that is not an example of leadership. That is not inspiring that student to be better than they would have been otherwise. I'm not saying we need to bend the rules all the time, but we need to connect with people at a human level. And so if we just start from this place, you know, when you take that position in the front of the classroom, you are there for the purpose of helping the students achieve a goal. And that goal is not going to be the same with every student. And we can't force them to do it, Leadership is not about power. It's not about force. It's not about position power. It's not, I'm in charge of the classroom, so do what I say. That's not what leadership is. That's the management piece of it. But when your students see you as a source of inspiration, that takes care of itself. And so that's what we're going to focus the bulk of our time on. But before I move on, anybody have any comments or questions?
No, just want to agree with what you were saying. We should handle students with grace, you know, and kindness.
Yes, absolutely.
And some of our policies, procedures to live by just does not reflect that. It doesn't reflect kindness and grace.
That most definitely happens.
Mhm.
And so let's talk about what leadership is. So leadership, when you're a teacher, faculty in the classroom, it's you and all the students in the classroom. To some extent, you develop individual one-to-one relationships with them, more in some classes than others, depending on the nature of the subject matter of what you're spending your time talking about. Probably in communication class, we learn a little more personal information about them that you might you teach finance, right? Do you still
Mhm.
teach finance?
Mhm.
So, but you probably still do. And we certainly, regardless of subject matter, help them navigate through barriers that stand between them and being successful in class. Leadership, though, rather than being specifically focused on those one-to-one relationships, is more one-to-many. Like, how do we motivate and move our classes toward the achievement of a goal in a workplace? How do we motivate our department, our team, our employees, our division, whatever it might be? And like I said, this Work of Leaders leadership project identified vision, alignment, and execution as the core elements of leadership. And the interesting thing about it is that the majority of people, to the majority of people, some aspect of these three things come very easily, and some aspects of these three things require a good bit of effort. What makes you a great leader, if vision is your strength, might make the execution piece of leadership more difficult for you. So what we're going to go through is we're going to go through and look at the behaviors that are associated with each of these so that you can kind of think through which ones are your natural strengths, with the idea being, when you know what your natural strengths are, and then you know if that's the opposite of the best practice, what's something specific you can work on to grow in leadership. Vision is an imagined future state. You're not there yet. It's a moving target. I need my students to imagine themselves successfully delivering one speech in class. I need them to see that come to life. I don't need to start talking to them about the second one yet, because they have that first hurdle. And so everything out of my mouth needs to be, I know you can do this. Here to help you do this. We've broken it into chunks so that you can build this process, build all the things that need to happen along the way, so you're completely prepared when you step up there. As a leader, I don't need to, oh, this is so hard. Oh, X% of people fail. That's the opposite of vision. I need them to see what is possible. Now, what is possible is not exactly the same for each person. Some people come in and they leave and they can be professional TED Talk speakers. Some people come in and they at least get the skills that they need to speak assertively and professionally in a job interview situation, which all of our students are going to need to do. But whether that's what they leave with or not, that's just as much on me as it is on them. And that's applicable across all subject matter. So from the very beginning of a relationship with a student, like, are you with the same students all the way through, or your students are cohorted, right?
Yes.
So you have longer with them than we do,
Yeah.
right?
Every day.
And
1:45.
and so did they have pretty much this, did they change teachers a lot throughout the programs? So
They're with me the entire time.
So you have an enormous impact on them.
Yes.
Yes, yes, and we have an enormous impact on our students as well, but we're not the only voice in their ear while they're crafting
Right.
that vision. And it's not a value statement, it's not a better or worse. The role that all of us play is equally important. So, oh, hello, yeah, I'm a little loud.
No, no.
The role that we all play is equally important. So, and I have to say that I'm very good at execution. Vision is something that I've had to really work hard at developing the skills that it takes to be that person. But when the student I told you about before came to me and said, no one has ever pointed out to me what exactly I need to do to get to where I need to be, that's exactly what I was doing. I was showing the student what was possible. It was up to them to pick it up and go and run. I wasn't sure if they would or not, but they did, and their work was flawless for the rest of class. Sometimes all someone needs is someone to believe in them and to point them the way to what they're trying to accomplish. So vision, we'll go through each of these individually in just a minute. Building alignment, you can get people to see what's possible. But then once people see what's possible, the next step is to get them to align around that vision. A lot of times the term that's used in the business world is buy-in. And do we need buy-in from our students? Absolutely, we need buy-in from our students. Have you had the experience of having a student come up and say, when are you going to tell us the alternate assignment? Because they're convinced that they're not going to be required to do a primary assignment. So we get them to see what's possible, but we also have to communicate with them in a way, to interact with them in a way that is going to build alignment. One way I do that is kind of related to last week's topic, which was cultivating a culture of teamwork, is consistently reinforcing that message of all being in this together so that they know that they're there to rely on one another, which is easier to do in an in-person environment than it is in an online environment. That poses unique challenges for alignment. And then the final is championing execution. Championing execution is about doing the things that need to be done to make the actual performance possible. Like, as a leader, it's not my job to execute their work for them. It's not my job to go, oh, you're struggling with the outline here, let me take over and write it for you. That is a disservice to the students because my role is to help them master that. So a leader has to be able to get people to see what's possible, get them excited about it, build alignment, and then lay the path for them to be successful. That's what championing execution is. So let's look at what this is. And again, this isn't my information. This is information that's based on this work of leaders. There is an actual assessment you can do, which costs money. So we're not doing that. We can think through we can think through this ourselves. We can be honest with ourselves about where our strengths are and where we need to work and develop. So what you see listed here, these are what you see on the right. The items on the right are the best practices for the key elements involved in crafting a vision. To craft a vision, you have to be able to encourage exploration. So the best practice for encouraging exploration is to remain open versus at the opposite extreme, which is to seek closure. That's one of the ones I struggle with. I'm wired for efficiency. I'm wired for the shortest path. Is that always the best thing for our students? No, it's not, especially if I have a student who's academically unprepared. If I'm pushing them too hard, they're going to just think, I can't do this. And so I have to work on that. I have to focus on remaining open. The other aspect of exploration is prioritizing the big picture versus prioritizing the details. You know, sometimes we want to immediately go to the details of how to do something without talking about the why. Does the why matter? Yeah, absolutely it matters. And our students, sometimes we need to consistently remind them why they're here, right? That's one thing we can do early in class to build engagement is get them to tell us what their goals are, why they chose to come to school, so that when they're struggling, we can remind them of that. And I'm not saying that prioritizing the details doesn't matter, but when you're in the vision phase, when you're working to get people to see what is possible, that is not the time to jump directly to the details. So best practice for vision, exploration, boldness, and testing assumptions. So boldness, adventurousness versus cautiousness. So people who are adventurous tend to enjoy the excitement of taking risks and are confident with the unknown versus people who are cautious tend to try to minimize risk and uncertainty. When we are focused on crafting that vision for what is possible, if we immediately go to the known solution, are we maybe limiting our students? If a student says, I'm majoring in XYZ, oh, you must want to work as Y. Well, are there more than one job possibility? Or is there more than one job possibility?
Always.
Always, always. And sometimes we inadvertently use language that's limiting to them when it's not in their best interest or our best interest to do so. But being adventurous, it comes with a comfort zone for having a comfort zone for risk taking. And so even though like with vision, I struggle with remaining open and prioritizing the big picture, risk taking and being adventurous, that comes more natural to me. I'm more likely to tell students they can choose any topic they want within certain parameters versus other people might be here are 5 topics, pick one. And I'm not saying that's wrong. It's a different approach. It's a more cautious approach. But if you have 7 weeks to bring this to life, you know, sometimes the ideas that I encourage them to come up with are so big they can't manageably research them within 7 weeks. There comes a time when you have to say, okay, now we got to get focused on these details. It's just when that's the first thing you do, it can be limiting to them. Make sense?
Mhm.
Speaking out versus holding back. Most faculty are probably wired to speak out based of the nature of what we do. But you know, we can't help students see what's possible if we don't speak out when we see opportunities for them to improve and to grow and to develop. You know, we find ourselves thinking, well, you know, I don't know what they learned in high school. Maybe they don't know this. Maybe I shouldn't push them this hard. Well, our job is to prepare them for a career or to continue on to higher education. And if they do not have the skills that they need to succeed in a college level class, at some point, they're gonna have to have them, right? So the way I feel about that is that kind of stops with me. I need to speak out to try to push them to where they need to go, to get them to see what is possible. What thought do you have an idea of where you might fall in between the best practice and the what I call the opposite of the best practice in these areas?
Personally, I'm adventurous
Okay, try new things.
and I'm speak out almost always. Like there are moments when I do pull in. So
Well, and that's probably very wise.
I'm very cautious and I hold back a lot because it's a new environment for me. So
Mhm.
I want to be cautious with what I do, how I do, until I get acclimated,
That makes
you know?
that makes perfect sense. And I'm not saying that's bad. I'm saying that when you're in the mindset of, here's this new group of students, and today my job is to help them see what is possible. So they are so committed and ready to move forward. That might be the time to stretch a little bit outside of your comfort zone, but let that cautiousness keep you from, I'm not saying to throw caution to the wind. It
Right.
is my point, that sometimes that's gonna be the strength, like that is, with alignment, that is so much more important than it is with the vision stage. And sometimes our comfort zones put barriers between us and being able to see what we should be doing in the moment based on what our goal is. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? Yeah, yeah.
I probably do better in the exploration and boldness areas. That's probably more of my stronger suit.
Your strengths.
Yes,
So-
and when it comes to testing assumptions, I'm probably in the middle because I'm more like, let's do it, fail, start over.
Yeah, that's me too.
Yeah, more like, what? Okay, we're not doing surgery here. Let's let's try it out, test it. If it don't work, we'll try again.
Of course, some of our folks are doing surgery.
Yeah.
So.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah,
Yes,
my
yes.
area, you know.
Right, and mine as well.
Yeah. so-
And yeah, and sometimes people ask, like, that's kind of why I stopped before. It was, why is testing assumptions part of crafting a vision? It's wonderful to have to get people to see this amazing future that they can achieve, but gravity still exists. We do have to be grounded in reality. So even though adventurousness and speaking out and looking at the big picture and remaining open are best practices for leadership, we have to do so within the realm of possibility. We have to seek counsel is the best practice. I'm more likely to want to decide independently. I'm very fortunate that I have a colleague in my division who is one of the most naturally collaborative people I have ever met in my life. I don't know if you know her, April Kidd. I know you know her. She is very naturally collaborative, and it's a really strong sign of leadership to seek out people whose strengths don't mirror yours, but who fill in what are not your strengths. And so she and I are a good balance for each other when it comes to looking at new ways of doing things, because we do need seeking counsel is really part of transitioning to that step of alignment when you're talking about it with your own team. This is when we're told to engage in participative learning, to ask students what they think, to give them options and choices. That is a way of seeking counsel from those that we are tasked with leading. And yes.
I was gonna say, we do have in the chat, Andy, but I'm reserved because of new laws as to what I can say in my teaching. So he was talking to the speaking up part.
Yeah.
So I thought we might want to reflect back on that just to get him in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and that is very true. I mean, vision isn't the place to pose what we wish the laws allowed us to do versus what we cannot do. That's more in that execution, dealing with the realities of the limitations that are placed on us. So that's a very good point. And then exploring the implications too versus just pushing forward. That is looking at the possible outcomes of what we're doing. Like if you have a student who doesn't want to do an assignment, you could just think, I can't make them do it. But what can we do to help them accomplish their goal? Can we talk to them about the implications, how it will affect them if they do not attempt it? And it seems that a lot of times their mindset is all or none. If I can't get 100, I'm not going to do it at all. So we can talk to them about how having 60 points will affect their grade versus having 0 points will affect their grade. That's helping to craft that vision, because when they're stressed out about doing something, whatever it is, they may not think through that process. And that's what a leader does. A leader asks the right questions to help people see what they need to do to move forward. And we should really make sure we're not using language with our students that puts limitations on them. But we can't focus solely on vision throughout the entirety of the class. We have to get them to see the goal, get them to see themselves being successful, and then create that environment through how we interact with them to build alignment so that alignment is what makes it possible for people to move forward. And the key elements of alignment are clarity, dialogue, and inspiration. And remember, we said that leadership is about inspiring people to be better than they would have been without us. So can you think of things that faculty sometimes say to students that interfere with clarity, that fall into offering intuition instead of explaining rationale, or impromptu messaging instead of structured messaging?
I think oftentimes when, from a faculty perspective, I guess the offer intuition part would be where everything is about their feelings,
Okay.
about how they feel,
Mm-hmm.
staying in their feelings, like
Mm-hmm.
my kids say. Instead of, being more fact-based,
Right.
not based off, because your feelings are based off your own beliefs, perceptions. And sometimes that can interfere with people to stay diverse because you're not allowing them to get the facts and logic.
Yes, absolutely. I would agree. I would agree with
Mhm.
that. And the students need to know the why behind what we're asking them to do. The assignment is X for this reason, not just because I'm in charge and I decided this is what
I feel like this is
you need
best.
to do.
Right.
And our experience is not necessarily the same as their experience. So as much as we can stay fact-based and open to different experiences, that helps build alignment, because the students need to feel like drawn to what it is that they're trying to accomplish. And at some point they were drawn to what they've chosen to major in, but their experience in a particular class or with a particular professor could break that. And one word that someone says could cause them to go in a different direction. We need to continually interact with them in a way that reminds them of, I guess this is set for a short time to me.
It should pop back up.
Yeah, in.
I will say, like, in my.
I'll work on
opinion,
that.
On that,
Uh-huh.
what I struggle with is battling with TikTok. Is being one,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Because
Yeah.
influencers are on there, but they don't realize a lot of those influencers, they're not licensed estheticians. They're given misinformation, but because it's so popular and they see, well, my friend is following this and this and this, then that's the right fact,
Mm-hmm.
So it can be challenging it can be challenging. And so, sometimes we have like our curriculum and we show them how to do the proper steps, but some kind of way, they still go back to TikTok. They won't refer back to what we're doing, Sometimes it's kind of challenging on that end.
I can see that. I don't usually run into that in a public speaking class, but I can definitely see that being the challenge in aesthetics. I most definitely.
Yeah.
How about you? Have you had that experience?
No,
Students?
not
'Cause
really.
there's-
Yeah, it's just different, different. But what I would say to that is when I first, if you know that is a challenge, when you control your classroom, you let them know that yes, TikTok is out there,
Right.
Facebook, Instagram, I'll watch it, right? We all enjoy
Yeah.
it, it's entertainment, we all like to be entertained. But my goal is for safety. right?
Yeah.
Our goal is for you to, when you have your clients, you want them a safe environment. You want to make sure that you're all about safety. So I would probably say, so class, how would you feel if you went to someone that wasn't licensed to get this done and they put you in an unsafe environment? Who want to sign up for that? Right? Nobody's gonna raise their hand. So you help them understand the why by asking them, you're gonna go there knowing they're not licensed and could put you in an unsafe environment, condition that can possibly result in, I don't know what it could result in, but you know, right?
Right.
So who wanna sign up for that? That's what I would do.
Right, remind them.
Remember,
Yeah,
you're
right,
one day
yeah.
gonna have clients, right?
Right.
And so you don't wanna put anyone in an unsafe environment. So what I'm here for is to help you put your clients in a safe environment.
Right, and that your vision is to be able to make a living as an esthetician. That's
Yes.
what the people that you're watching are not making a living as an esthetician. They're making a living
As an
as,
influencer.
right, as an influencer, as an entertainer, basically. And shock value sells in that environment. It does, you know, so if you can ground it into they make their money a different way. Now, I mean, they might run screaming and decide to go try to be influencers instead of estheticians. That's entirely possible. It could happen, but you know, that's back to reminding them about that why as well.
Yeah.
And that leads perfectly into the next element of alignment, which is dialogue. We have to engage in dialogue. Dialogue is an exchange of information. It is not one way as telling the class, this is how it will be, go do it the way I told you, and I will see you on Thursday. That's not what dialogue is. We have to engage in an exchange of information with them, and that's how we build those relationships. So the best practice for leadership with alignment is not to present information. And as faculty, that's what we're trained to do, isn't it? To present information, but really we need to exchange perspectives with them, give them an opportunity to voice their opinions and truly be heard and interact with us and with one another. And that requires us letting them know that their perspectives matter. That yes, we may write the tests, but that their thoughts, their ideas, and we're there to help. And if those are going down the wrong path, we're there to ask the right questions to help them go down the path that they need to be going down. So, now, do we need to present information sometimes? Yes. But for alignment, when we're trying to get that buy-in, I don't stand up and rattle off, these are the things that people say make them nervous about public speaking. I'll say, could you share with me something that you feel when you think about giving a speech? And then they hear, oh, that person's nervous about it too, or that person's done it. Maybe they can help me. There's so much value to that. That helps them find commonality to rally around. It starts helping that group of individuals who are going through this class together start to feel like something of a team where they will look out for one another, and that sets the stage for success. But us doing that is necessary for that to happen. So dialogue also involves being more receptive than being more challenging. That's one of the ones that's difficult to me. But I do it, right? You know, a student will say, I'd like to do my speech on X. I'm not really sure that fits the assignment, but if you can convince me that it does, you absolutely can. You know, as opposed to, no, that's gonna be too hard, don't do that. And sometimes they figure out, you know what, it is gonna be too hard, I'm not gonna do that. But sometimes it leads to this amazing project that was even beyond what I had thought was possible, because they're going to be much more engaged in what they're doing if they can apply the concepts they're learning to things that matter to them, to what their interests are and what their goals are. But just like as faculty, we're often trained to live in the area of presenting information. I think we're trained sometimes to live in the area of prove to me why you think that, versus asking the question in a way that is more receptive. And Felicia just modeled that, like, you know, of getting them to think through the bad things that could happen in a scenario that in their mind, they may have been influenced to think is appropriate, because when they are able to think through it and verbalize it, then they're gonna own it. Then it was their idea, then they figured it out. You didn't swoop in and save the day, but you helped be that steady source of leadership for them. Alignment also involves inspiration, and that requires being expressive versus being reserved. I use more exclamation points in student feedback now than I have used in the entirety of the rest of my life. But it really, and I'm not telling you to go overboard with using exclamation points. The English faculty will hunt me down. But we do need to be expressive and effusive in praise when praise is warranted. We do need to show enthusiasm, and because maybe we grade the same assignments for 5 different classes twice a year, every year, but it's the first time for them. And they deserve to be met with the same level of excitement and expressiveness from us as we felt the first time that we did it. And alignment is also about coming across as encouraging. Being encouraging is the best practice versus being more matter of fact. And again, I'm not saying there's not a time and a place for matter of fact. A lot of times people who are naturally good at vision are great with coming up with these awesome ideas, and they can get people all excited about it, but they just can't make them happen. A leader has to be able to do all three. A leader has to be able to do all three. And with vision alignment and execution, it's championing execution, not execution. Like I said earlier, it's not jumping in and taking over. So to help bring things to life, the best practices are momentum, structure, and feedback. So with momentum, we need to drive our students to accomplish what they need to accomplish, holding fast to those deadlines, but showing grace and being flexible, because if they lose momentum toward achieving what it is that they need to achieve, it's easy to just end up not doing what it is that they need to do. We need to be initiating versus reactive. Like the example I gave earlier, not waiting for someone to not turn in a big project, but reaching out to them proactively to try to remove barriers from them, from in front of them that are keeping them from being successful. With structure, there needs to be a plan versus improvising. Like rubrics are a type of structure. They're so important. It's only fair for people to know what they're going to be evaluated on. As opposed to just grading in a way that is purely subjective. That would be improvising, and that is not really conducive to championing execution. Not telling them how they're going to be evaluated is not making it possible for them to execute. Analyzing in depth versus following first impressions, like that feedback that says, can you help me understand why you did X, instead of X is wrong, points off, no way to get them back again. And feedback, of course, is critical to championing execution. We need to focus on addressing problems, not just maintaining harmony. Being nice and kind isn't necessarily the hallmark of a strong leader, but the opposite of that, being mean and nasty, is also absolutely not the hallmark of a strong leader. Having those difficult conversations, not letting problems fester, addressing them, and really being very open to offering praise when it is warranted. If we are praising our students for work that is substandard, is that a good thing?
No.
No, it's not a good thing for them, because they're going to think they're at a level where they're not. It's not a good thing for the organization, because we're going to send students out into the workplace whose skills are not at a level that they are not. And so these are the best practices for championing execution. But like to a person that praise comes very naturally to, addressing problems is often challenging to that individual. You know, usually like when I see the actual assessments, they're the opposite. I'm good at addressing problems naturally, and I tend to offer less praise naturally. It doesn't mean I don't do it. I do. I push myself. And the benefit of a tool like this is to look at this and get a sense of where you naturally fall, left to your own tendencies, your natural tendencies, left to your own devices. What comes easy to you, where you think you would be, and the areas where you would plot yourself on the left side of this, those are the things to focus on working on so that you can meet the needs of your students with regards to all aspects of leadership. You know, here we are near the very end of the term. The vision work should have been done. The alignment work should have been done. We're still tweaking it with some students, but here we are at that execute part. And of course, it's not linear like that. I mean, they have projects and assignments that are due all along, but this last week of classes is not the time to go, oh yeah, by the way, let's talk about why you're here, because they're about to not be in our classes. Well, you'll continue to have them, but we probably won't. So, you know, it's when you don't have the same students consistently, it's a constant process of establishing leadership with your students. And it starts from the very first moment of class. People watch individuals that they perceive in leadership positions very closely. They take their cues from them, and the culture of our classroom is very much tied to whether they see us as leaders or not. And this is one set of information that you can use out of the 80,000 leadership books that are out there to help you grow as a leader. And I realize I've talked a little too long. I'm supposed to end a quarter after. I have a habit of that. I apologize.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any comments or questions, any insights you can use?
I think this was great, you know, this was great because I won't lie, I've been reflecting and seeing like big picture, and then if I'm really truly aligned with what we're doing here at Chattanooga State. And this helps a lot, you know, to figure out what that focus and if I'm truly aligning myself and making sure my students are in that same position. So thank you, Jim.
Sure.
Mary, I
I
gotta
think it's
tell
really
you,
important to ask them what their goals are, because that sort of becomes their true north, you know, and if we know what their goals are, we can try to make sure all their feedback is focused on helping them make progress toward that goal and remind them of why they're doing this.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And I
One
think
of-
Andy had something to say as well.
Okay, good.
yeah, no, one of the things that I heard you say that was surprising, but I think I knew it, but I'm not really sure. But when you were talking about communication and actually approaching it from a manner of listening and just trying to get different perspectives, what immediately came out to me is that could turn into a situation where you're meeting or having a conversation more than once in order to get to a resolution. So that hit me like a ton of bricks. So I'm definitely going to incorporate that. That's really interesting. So thank you for that.
Sure, it's very important for alignment to do that. And me, Ms. Efficiency minded, I have to push myself to do it because, you know, in my head, I'm like, if I just tell them what to do, it'll be over faster. They'll get done faster. I'm gonna keep great. But that's not, that just is gonna get them to parrot what I tell them instead of them arriving at what they need to be. And what they're gonna remember 10 years from now is the teacher who helped them get to where they needed to be.
Mhm. That's the goal.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. And everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we can exit into the air conditioning now.
I know.
Woo.